Barbee. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Excited to be doing this with you.
Yeah, I before we started recording, I was going into a story that I'm trying to, with this podcast, talk about these like critical moments in people's lives that may be able to encourage other people and inspire other people. And then selfishly, there's a lot of questions that I have that, you know, I've always thought that I wanted to ask somebody. And, you know, we see each other at events and we talk on the phone occasionally, but it doesn't always come up where I'm able to, like, you know, kind of go into like nerding out about public domain or ban this or, you know, kind of some of those videos that, you know, I grew up in Alabama. So for me, watching those videos was like, it was a real trip. And to be able to be sitting down with you, like sometimes I bug out on that. And, I'm just thankful, but also I'm really excited to kind of talk about some of those, some of those special times.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I always thought it was neat that you came from Alabama because my mom's from Alabama.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Mobile. Dad's from Arkansas. Mom's from Alabama.
Both from the South.
Yeah. Yeah. And
cool.
so.
Have you been to Alabama?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, early on.
Yeah.
Early on, you know. It's been a long time, but yeah, anyways, I always thought it was cool that you're from there.
Well, right on. I'd like to kind of start with like your introductory to skateboarding and kind of like how you found skateboarding, and then from there kind of how you started getting sponsored and, you know, your take on that. And
yeah. I mean, I always say, you know, I got into skateboarding at an interesting time in skateboarding because, you know, I got into skateboarding early 80s. I want to say around 84-ish, around there. And so I first got into skateboarding through a mutual friend who got a skateboard for his birthday, basically. And we'd always ridden bikes together after school on the weekends. And I'll never forget him inviting me to his house because he's like, oh, I'm having a birthday party. Come over and get over there. And he's getting all his gifts. And then his dad sets down the skateboard. And
do you remember what board it was?
Yeah, it was a Veriflex Vectra. And it was just super graphic.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really dynamic. It had a lot of lines shooting out and stuff, and the colors. And for me, it was like, I had seen skateboards before, but they're always in the version of what we would know today as like the you know, pennies.
Yeah.
You know,
banana board.
Back then we called them banana boards. Yeah.
We'll stick with that. We'll call it banana board.
And so those things sucked. I mean, those things were like, if a friend had that and I tried to hop on it, it was always sluggish and slow. It was plastic.
It was like a toy.
Yeah, plastic. Yeah. So you're flexing on it, you know, and so that was the definition of skateboarding for me up until seeing my friend Danny getting this skateboard for his birthday. And then that skateboard, I was just like, whoa. I remember just thinking like, dude, that thing is like the coolest thing I've ever seen, I think. And so now he's on that skateboard, I'm on my bike, and I'm just like, dude, how can I get one of those? Because now the sense of wonder is just next level because I'm like, you know,
what can you do?
I don't know anything about this other than it's just like, this thing looks so cool, but like it's just such a whole nother world. And so anyways, I remember just telling him like, man, I want to get a skateboard. And he's all, dude, my dad used to skateboard. I guess his dad skateboarded in the 70s, skating those parks, you know? And he's like, my dad has a board in the garage. You know, let me see if it's still there. And sure enough, he found it, and it was a Sims wood kick. And so it wasn't quite the boards of the time. It wasn't like the Veriflex Vectra that he had, but it wasn't the banana boards. Yeah. Right? It was somewhere in between, but it was wood and not plastic. So I'm like, okay, cool. I think he had ACS trucks, they're called, just these small guys, and it's a wood kick because it's got a wood block that's giving you the feel of what we know now
That's
with
terrible.
the mold of the kicks coming up.
Yeah.
You know, and so I cruised around with that for about a week or two. No grip tape, so it was a bummer if I stepped in water. You know.
Yeah.
But I'm following my buddy Danny. We're just cruising around, just being like, "Whoa, this is fun," you know. And then I think that was in the summer between 6th and 7th grade. So then, you know, the new school year for 7th grade starts. We go to school, and you know, we see this crew of guys that look like skateboarders, because back then it wasn't hard to know who was a skateboarder or not.
Yeah.
And we just kind of would go over to them, and you know, I can't remember how it went down, but the gist of it was, you know, what did you guys do over the summer? And we're like, we skate. And they're like, we skate too, come hang out with us. Yeah. And that group of dudes right there, those dudes introduced me to the culture and this new world of skateboarding. And the first thing that they did was say, dude, we got to get you a board. We know Johnny up the street who his parents just bought him a new board. Let's see if he's got his old one that he'll sell to you. And I remember, like, after school, we go over there. I, like, got $5 for mowing lawns or something. Went over there, and sure enough, the dude had his old board because he had his new one, and sold it to me for $5. And it was a Santa Cruz Jammer, it was called.
I remember that board.
And, yeah, it was black, Jammer in white, and then it had, like, barbed wired fence layered over it, you know? And, dude, that was my jam. That was my board. And but I didn't have trucks, right? So I had those little ACS trucks that were so much smaller than the board.
Did the bolt configuration even fit?
The bolt fit. That whole deal worked. But the wheels were so far in because the board was way wider than that Sims wood kick.
Yeah.
You know?
Wood kick was like 6 inches or
something. Whatever.
Yeah.
Right? And then so I'm going out to 10.
Yeah.
You know? And so the wheels were in. You know what I mean? I've got, 3 inches, 2.5 on each side? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I didn't care.
You were jamming.
I didn't care, dude. I was like, all right, like, I'm in it, you know? And, you know, and there's such fond memories of that time because I trip out on the fact that from that excitement, from that curiosity to explore and to want to learn more about this skateboard, I trip out on thinking that where that curiosity has led me, you know. It's really a heavy thing to think about that, you know. Yeah. And it shows me the importance of indulging your curiosities, you know, because you never know where that can lead to.
Yeah, that was a life-changing moment.
Dude, that right there set the course.
Yeah.
I had no idea that I'd be, you know, almost 47 still riding this thing.
Yeah.
You know, enjoying it and able to make a living and provide for my family.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. I think about it quite often, and it is very surreal when you think back to the beginnings, the humble beginnings of that discovery, and then these, you know, decisions that you made early on in your life. You know, like you said, it set the course, and skateboarding became a vehicle for our lives. It became how we learned things. It taught us how to navigate life, and it started off with like tricks, and then the same methodology that you use with tricks you can apply in other aspects of your life. And I trip out on that regularly. It's probably once a week where I trip out. Like I'm just because whenever I talk about it too, it dawns on me like, yeah, I did grow up in Alabama. I did grow up so far away from where I am right now. Mm-hmm. And that passion for skateboarding and to try and be around like-minded individuals brought me here.
Yeah.
You know, and that set the course. But
yeah, so, I mean, it's a to me, it's an interesting thing when you think about how important it is to have interests.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because your point of contact with people becomes, or I should say, your point of contact with people really comes from the mutual interests that you share.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny because over the years, it's just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of common sense, but you really don't think about it. But the more that I think about it, it's through these interests that you build relationships, that you build communities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And so when I talk about, going to, me and my buddy skate, getting turned on to skateboarding, but we're still solo, just me and him exploring this new toy, if you will, by ourselves. And then we go to school, and now that interest that we have in this opens the door to now being a part of this way bigger group of people or community or whatever. Like, that's huge. You know what I mean? Because and what's really neat is, and I think what we're talking about with skateboarding is, interests are important, but then when you have an interest that has so much power to it or depth to it, like skateboarding's got so much to it, and that's your mutual interest, that's where it's just like, whoa, now I'm playing in a band, I'm playing, I've always wanted to play guitar, even before getting into skateboarding. MTV baby, basically, because again, 84, I'm not sure when MTV came out, but
yeah, it was
somewhere right around there. I was in 5th grade.
I think it was 84, actually.
Yeah, I was in 5th grade, and I just remember just being enamored with the bands, these live concert footage, because it was 24/7 music.
Mm-hmm.
At that time. It's really hard to imagine now.
Yeah.
But at that time, they came out saying it's 24/7 music. And so if you think about, that's a lot of content you have to have.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't that many bands filming music videos.
Mm-hmm.
And so the content was concert footage. And I remember Friday night or Saturday night, it would be they would show a full concert of either Ozzy, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, or something, right? And then during the day, they pull out one song from those concerts, and then just kind of rotate that way. So I saw a lot of just performances, basically. And I remember seeing the singer, and I'd be like, oh yeah, he's cool. But dude, when that lead guitarist would step up and do his thing, I was like, that's the man. And I just identified with that. And I was like, dude, that is so cool. Oh man, I wish I could play guitar. And at that time, the school that I went to, there were a lot of stoners that were ripping guitarists, and they were quintessential, where they would cut school and just be in their garage, and they just have their amp and their Jackson guitar or Gibson Flying V or whatever, and they just be in there rocking, smoking pot and rocking. And I'd be walking home from school, and I'd see these dudes in their garages, and I would just hang. At first, I would hang kind of on the outskirts, wouldn't go on their property. I would just stand on the sidewalk and just be listening, and because they'd always have the door open, because they were just they're so proud of it. That was kind of their deal, right?
Yeah.
And then after a while, they'd be like, hey man, come up. And they'd have their cigarette break. They'd be like, here, check it out, or something, And so there was always this interest in wanting to play music or play guitar. But other than those dudes, I didn't really know kids at my age that had their own guitars. And so the closest I could get to it was when those guys on their cigarette breaks or when they're smoking pot or whatever handed me the guitar, But getting introduced to these skaters And now these dudes have a punk band. And now before we'd go skate, they'd have band practice. Now I'm right there able to like play their guitars. And then before long, I'm in the band. Because I've bugged them to teach me the songs or teach me chords or whatever, you know? And so I guess what I'm saying is that interests are important, but when there's an interest that is so dynamic and has so much depth as like skateboarding, it's just kind of next level.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. It goes into, you know, art, music, business.
Exactly.
You know, there's so many different, you know, videography, photography. There's so many directions that are in the scope inside of skateboarding, and that is what makes it so cool and what makes it so interesting.
Yeah.
So you talk about like getting into skating with your buddies, and then that, you know, shortly after opened the door to music for you. But when did skateboarding get a little bit more serious where you were like, you know, getting sponsored, or how was that transition from skating around the neighborhood to totally actually getting hooked up?
Yeah, so a part of the, you know, our crew, because what's rad about skateboarding is the kind of rank, if you will. You know, it's like skateboarding really has this cool dynamic of because of, it's much like music, right? Because your age doesn't play that much of a role of who you can hang out with or do it with, if you will. It's all about your ability, right? And so where sports, it's tough to play basketball with a young kid, right? Because he's just physically not there to be able to hang, right? But what I love about skateboarding is that it's not weird to skate with either younger kids or older people, you know what I mean? And so what I always appreciated was this kind of like having the older dudes in skateboarding being cool with you and allowing you to hang out and skate with them, and you know. And so in our crew, you know, I kind of look at it as like there was like the older dudes and then there was us.
And the older dudes are like...
And the older dudes were like, and I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. They were to the point where some of them were good enough to be sponsored.
Right.
And were sponsored.
And in your guys' crew, that's like Robert Torres, Randy Smith, Ricky Windsor.
No, those guys were later. Robert was there, but Ricky and Randy, that was later. This is Jim Namba, who these guys was Jim Namba, Harry Wilson. Those guys, Harry was kind of like the legend around where we live because
That's San Jose?
Yeah, this is San Jose. Yeah, he was sponsored early on, like the park days, and so we always knew like, dude, like that was the dude, but he had kind of gotten out of it.
Yeah.
He was still around, but it was funny because we couldn't really see it in him. Because he wasn't functioning in that. He's kind of already at that point over his thing. Yeah. You know? But Namba was always right there with him. But Jim Namba was still functioning in it. So Namba, like, when we would skate our local half pipe, because that's what happened. These guys that I met, you know, again, starting going to middle school in 7th grade, meeting these skaters. Well, not only did they have the band, but they had the quarter pipe. 5 foot high, 8 foot wide quarter pipe that started at my friend Todd Jackson's house, because that's where he was a drummer, so that's where he practiced. His parents were super cool, so that was the hangout house. Yeah, that was the jam.
Super important.
And you needed that, crucial, right? Yeah. And and where the quarter pipe was, and so I'll never forget just being in a line. We just all be in a line, because with the quarter pipe, it's like you hit it, come back, get in line. Everybody go, do their trick, come back, get in line, right? And so we're there in the garage just waiting to hit the quarter pipe, right? And and Todd's dad was really into he was a biker, and so part of that culture, like the Harleys and Hell's Angel culture, I don't know if he was ever a Hell's Angel or anything, but he's that from that culture. And so I forget the name of the magazine. I forget the name, but it had all these crazy illustrations all over the wall.
Easy Rider?
Easy Rider, exactly. Yeah. And so I remember I'd just be like in line, like before hitting the quarter pipe, just tripping on these Easy Riders, just being like, whoa, dude. Like,
yeah, because they were pretty graphic.
They were heavy, dude. Yeah. They were heavy.
It was a lot of,
and it was all done on the bike. It was all sex stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of it. Yeah. And it was done on the bike while they were riding on the bikes, Yeah. And so anyways, like, I'll just never forget just, that was our deal. But we went from that 5 foot high, 8 foot wide quarter pipe, and we found out about another dude who was selling one, same thing, 5 foot high, 8 foot wide. And so either selling it or giving it away. I'll never forget, we went and got that, and then we went up to our friend Mike's house, who was up the street, and then we put them together. And so we made a half pipe, 5 foot high, 8 foot wide half pipe. And so that eventually turned into 8 foot high, 20 foot wide ramp. Back then we called it vert ramp.
Yeah.
Nowadays it'd be like a mid or something.
Yeah.
But back then, and so that's just that was our stomping grounds. We called it Club Griffin's because our friend Mike Griffin, that was his house, and his parents are just amazing because they just allowed us to just take over for years, And so during that time, the older dudes would come and just kill it, dude. And so Jim Namba, he really stood out because Namba would be no pads, full, like, just Smith grinds, frontside Smith grinds, great frontside ollies, backside. His board control was just next level, especially for back then. And so anyways, I was being around those dudes, I saw, like, good skateboarding. And then them turning me on to the magazines and stuff, you quickly learn, like, where skateboarding goes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you get into it, but it can function at this level. You get, you get hip to the pros and amateurs, and then a lot of, like, the local amateurs that skated vert, like John Fabriker and Jeff Fedge Hedges and Greg Aguilar and Corey O'Brien, and a lot of these guys that were sponsored, a lot of them by Santa Cruz, would come by and skate the ramp, and then we'd just be like, what the heck, And so I always knew about, the aspect of being sponsored for skateboarding and, and turning pro and stuff, And my friend Robert Torres, what's interesting about Robert is that when Robert was really young, I want to say 8 or 9, he had this interesting thing where he'd hopped on snowboarding super early. And so he had gotten sponsored by Sims for snowboarding. And then somehow that translated to, he was skating the early parks. Because, living in San Jose, Milpitas was like next door. Mm-hmm. And so there was a park in Milpitas that Robert skated. And so he had a photo in a magazine being sponsored by Sims. And it was a skate photo. And so anyways, Robert knew about that whole, he'd already experienced it, what it was like to get sponsored and be a part of what a brand's doing, And so I, one year, skating a vert ramp in San Jose, I lock up on a body jar and just boom, just dislocated my wrist. While I had that cast on, my parents were like, you're not skateboarding with that cast. And so I'm like, okay. But I always hung out at my friend Robert's house, and Robert had a backup board. He had another board there. And so I would use that and we'd go skate. But during that time, I knew I couldn't take the bus to get out to the vert ramp. I'd get caught. And because of the cast, skating the ramps kind of wasn't an option. So what we did more of is what we always did when we would get kicked out of skating the ramp, or if the neighbors would be like, okay, that's enough, it's 7 o'clock, we would still all be hanging out. We go to local gas stations or schools and just still be skating. But it's funny because back then the approach was very ramp oriented. Everything we did was mimicking what we were doing on the coping or what we would do trying to blast out of it. Bonuses or axle stalls or whatever, right? This time, kind of approaching it different, because right around this time when I have my cast and we can't skate the ramps, jump ramps are kind of coming into play. And guys are bringing them to schoolyards. And so now there's a different dynamic now to not skating the ramps but being out in the streets. Now it's like, wow, what's this thing? And what are we doing? Oh, doing judos like we would do on the ramp. But then it kind of opened it up to try different things. And it was during that time where I was just kind of like, man, this is really fun. And this is different. Because with the skating ramps, it was like you had a laundry list of tricks that you had to learn. It was like, okay, I learned an invert. I learned fakie ollies. I learned rock and rolls, fakie rocks, 50-50s, axle stalls, frontside airs. You're constantly like, okay, what's next? Ooh, okay, let's try indie airs. Okay, let's do mute. And then we get out in the street and it's like, okay, learn the ollie, learn the kick flip. And then it was just like, oh, there's nothing. Wow. We can just explore and just try stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And do that right there was just like, okay.
You had less expectation going into it, so everything was new and exciting.
Yeah. It was uncharted kind of feeling. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah. Much like seeing that skateboard for the first time where you're just like, dude, I want to go here. I don't know what I'm about to get into, but this looks exciting.
Yeah.
It was that same thing,
Totally.
And it was just like, whoa. And that's just kind of where, from then, even when I got my cast off, I was just like, I still skated ramps and things, but I had already created an appetite to be exploring out in the streets.
Yeah.
And so it was during that time that we were just sponges in the sense of just like, whoa, like all we wanted to do were go to these, they just call them like street jams. And basically what it was is like on the weekends, people would bring ramps over to a schoolyard and people would find out about it through flyers or word of mouth, and just people would show up from all over, San Francisco, neighboring cities, Santa Cruz, come out to these street jams, and you just skate all day. Bring the ramp over to the wall, do wall rides, jump, you know what I mean? People would bring obstacles, and you just be there skating, and it was just addictive. We were just like, man, like, because it was just kind of like, we just felt like it was this, almost like this world that we found within this thing that we love. We found all of a sudden this other dimension of it that's more exciting than we were experiencing before.
Yeah.
And we're just like, whoa. And so in that process, the more we started going down that route, we'd hear about street contests and things. And then it was like, dude, there's a contest in Santa Clara. All right, let's go. Go there, and like, I'll never forget, Jeff Kendall and Mark Gonzalez show up. And I swear to this day, and I forget who I was telling the other day, I think Greg Hunt, because we were just on a trip together. I was like, dude, I swear Gons only had 3 wheels. And it was the first time I'd ever seen a 360 ollie. Like backside, 360 air off a jump ramp. grabbing just backside, just like boom.
Yeah.
Him and Kendall were just blasting him, and we were just like, what? Because
he did that with 3 wheels.
I swear I saw 3 wheels. I swear. To this day, dude. I swear.
Nobody believes that story. That sounds insane.
Yeah, right.
Are you sure you just didn't have a weird colored wheel that looked like...
No, I mean... Yeah. You know how it is.
Because he would have had to have had both his back wheels in order to ride. In order to do
it was a front.
Yeah,
it was a front for sure.
I mean, it's not unfathomable that Gons would be that far to the box.
Take it for what it is, but... that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah, if it
was anybody but Gons, I would say there's no way. You would there had to have been some mistaken. But
I mean, you know the deal. I could be remembering it off. I don't.
You wouldn't forget that though. That's like
no, that's the deal. It's like that was the impression. I was just like, whoa, And
have you ever talked to Gons about that?
No, I don't think I ever did.
That's the first thing I'd be like, Mark.
I know, right?
Do you ever remember going to a jam or a contest and skating with 3 wheels? Okay, so your mind was blown by Jeff Kendall.
So we're there, and again, we're just like, whoa, like just all of a sudden, just experiencing this again, whole other world, right? And so, the more we delve off into that, and the more that we go to these contests and things, then Robert's like, dude, we can get sponsored. And I was like, yeah, right. And he's like, he could tell that we were onto something, And because of his history, he's got relationships, right? Yeah. And so he's like, I'm going to reach out to Sims and see if we can get sponsored. And I'm like, all right, dude. Like, okay. And so, dude, he calls Sims, gets a hold of Steve Rocco, who at this time, Steve Rocco and Gons are the team managers. If you can fathom that, right? And so these dudes are like...
So Gons rode for Vision.
Yeah, but Vision and Sims, it's all Dorfman. It's all one thing.
Yeah.
Right?
So Gons was like kind of...
Gons rode for Vision. Rocco's riding for Sims. But, again, they're all under the same roof. So these two dudes are team managers. And so Robert's talking to Rocco. And Rocco's like, huh, okay. And so he sends us a package. He sends us 2 boards, his boards, Rocco's.
Yeah.
Rocco's street board. It was like a street model or whatever. I remember Robert got the white one. I got the black one. And it was like, Robert's was like white with pink, and mine was black with pink or lettering. And dude, we were just like, we thought we arrived. We were just like, what? Mm-hmm. I mean, and granted, we weren't even sponsored. It was just Rocco hooking us up. Yeah. You know what I mean? But dude,
it was enough though.
Dude, to get a free boards in the mail, and just to be acknowledged and like, okay, here, I think there were wheels. I think they sent us wheels too. Dude, we were just
the Sim Street wheels were so good.
Yeah, those were. I'm not sure if that's what we got, but we were on cloud 9, dude.
They had snakes too, right? And blurs. Oh, that was Vision blurs.
And so we were just like, all right. And that was kind of like, that was the little bit of crack. Like the crack to kind of be like, whoa, maybe there is something here, And so, shortly after that, those dudes get fired from being team managers. Because undoubtedly they were just like, stealing product and selling it. And so they get busted. They're no longer team managers. But Rocco, at that same time, gets hired to be the team manager for Venture. And so Venture Trucks at this time is like a new company. Gons is riding for it. I think that's the only person on at that time. And Steve was like, look I can't get you guys boards anymore, but I'll put you on Venture Trucks. And we were just like, with Gons being on it, we were just like, yes, like we're on the same team with Gons. Like we're just so about it, right? And so and that one was a legit sponsor. Like we're a sponsor. Like okay, like
it's
not just
product.
It's not just Rocco like hooking us up with these boards that he shouldn't be taking or whatever. It's like, okay, we're on the list. Like, I don't need Rocco to get my trucks.
Right.
I remember I called Thrasher and be like, hey, can I get some trucks?
Yeah.
Which is funny because especially back then, like, how fast are you going through trucks?
Yeah.
But
not very often.
But just being able to call and get some stuff was just like everything, you know? And so that was kind of what opened the doors for going down that route of getting sponsored, you know?
Right. And then from there it went to Alva, and then from Alva,
exactly.
Stacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then from there we started going to Sacramento a lot to skate with our friends out there, Ricky Windsor and Randy Smith and Steve-O and his brother John Brockton, and it was and Sam Cunningham and Ross Goodman was in the mix. And it was like Sacramento's, it was their scene, but it was like the Go Skate dudes. There was this skate shop called Go Skate. And so it was their crew, like the Go Skate guys. And dude, we would take the Greyhound from San Jose to Sacramento. That Greyhound, like the drive would typically be like 2.5 hours or something, but Greyhound would push it out to like 4.5, 5 or something, right? But we'd bail after school on a Friday, get there late Friday night, and just link up with everybody and go skate. And it was just like, oh, I so looked forward to that, because how they were approaching skating street was just like so exciting to me. And they were the dudes, a lot of those guys, especially Randy and Ricky, that was where they showed us what you could do with flat ground, you know. And yeah, when we would go in there, it was just I felt like each time I would go to Sacramento, I would just learn so much.
Yeah,
just get so juiced, you know.
Yeah, it seemed that, you know, your first two POW parts, and I don't mean to skip ahead, but it seemed like your first two POW parts were predominantly flat ground, you know, like.
And that was really coming out of that. I mean, that's, you know, so influenced by that and what I learned through going out there and skating with those guys.
Totally. It was really unique, though. I remembered seeing it as a kid. And it's crazy to think that flat ground, I mean, I guess it still is pretty important. Like, if you put a, you know, video of yourself doing flat ground tricks on Instagram, it'll be your highest, like, grossing views over other things, which is pretty strange. But I remember that when that Rubber Boys part came out, public domain, and when it hit, I mean, first off, for me being a younger kid and you guys like being like the younger crew on POW, like I could identify it. The same with like, you know, Guy, Rudy, and Gabriel. I could identify with it, and while I liked the Bones Brigade, I thought they were cool. They were like grown-ups, and they were mostly skating vert. Yeah. So the fact that you guys were like just going out skating, like a crew going out and just skating through the sidewalks and through the streets, and then it looked as if you were just finding spots on the way. So it very much so translated to how me and my friends skated. Yeah. And it gave us a level of, you know, not just inspiration, but like, this is what you and your buddies filming could look like. You know? Yeah. I just remembered like wanting to learn. I watched Rubber Boys so many times, learning each one of the no comply tricks, you know, like one at a time. You know, like, okay, now today I'm learning the, you know, 180 no complies. I'm learning the 43 shifties. I remember just, you know, and all of them didn't work the same way as you did them too. Like some of them worked the same, but then like for the backside one, I had to step on like the other side of my board. I couldn't step on the same side. And I realized that, I don't know if you've seen, but nowadays like kids are learning like they you do the same side. Awesome. Yeah. It's really like almost like trendy.
It's a different feel. Yeah. The scoop.
So I did my best to learn those tricks, but watching those parts, like in Chet too, Chet was really small and I was kind of small in my posse. So
so you identify it.
Yeah, and you know, you guys were like skating that, I know that one part in Rubber Boys where you guys go to that little like
the little ledge.
The little ledge. And you do tricks
with
off
Thibaut with us.
Yeah.
Thibaut does that front side it's like a pivot. It was like an early frontside 360. Yeah. I remember.
And Chet, I think, does an impossible off the ledge as well. And that might have been the first impossible on a street board I had seen.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and then you know, and I just remembered being like in awe of that section. Like,
Yeah.
and the music too. Like the music was so good.
Yeah.
Like Chuck
Yeah. I
Trees.
mean, Stacy, dude. Yeah. I mean, just having, knowing what would function well with all of that.
Yeah.
Creating that whole feel, right?
Yeah. It totally was a feel. And for me, in the PAL videos, some of those, there was a bunch of cool stuff that came, that happened on the PAL videos. But that one, I felt like, I don't know. As a kid, I was like,
it hits you where you're at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, that's it's funny because how you were saying you could relate to Chet, and a lot of it because he was the small dude in the mix. It's like, dude, that was Tony Hawk for us.
Yeah.
Right? And, for us growing up, it was just like, dude, there's a little dude in the mix. We're all little dudes. Like, you're just looking for some example to give you hope.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? And when you can spot it, you've got such an emotional connection with it because you're like, dude, you're the dude showing me that it's possible because I'm trying to do it and I need to know that it's possible. Yeah. And you're showing me that it's possible. Yeah. So you're my guy.
Totally.
You know what I mean? And that's what Stacy was hip to, and that's what he saw that street skating could do.
Totally.
He saw that street skating could say, this is open up to all of you now.
Yeah, that LA Boys documentary that Colin Kennedy did.
Yeah, it's
was
great.
Like it really goes into that Stacy basically had a vision for knowing there was a change of guard.
Yeah, exactly.
And that he knew that he couldn't just sponsor one street kid. He needed to get crews that already had the chemistry. Yeah. That all he had to do was just follow them around with a camera, and they were going to be gold.
Yeah.
And I think that those two sections, they were big. They were big for me. And on the beginning of your band, this part with like the heat rising off the sidewalk, and you just doing flat ground heading towards them, like. Coming off of Public Domain, and it was only like a year and some change later.
Probably a year, yeah.
Yeah, and I like your part and your style of skating and just the way you moved in the Rubber Boys section was so unique from anything I'd ever seen. And when I got Ban This, and that song started, and you were just cruising at the camera, like I was so stoked because, I feel like. He made that part the sequel to your Rubber Boys part.
Yeah.
He really did a good job.
I almost feel like he saw what was starting
in
the mix with everybody, and then I feel like he had a really good vision for it existing on its own.
Yeah.
Because Public Domain, it's in there, but it's in the mix.
Yeah.
But I had turned pro from there, so all the pros had their solo part.
Yeah.
And so he did
the way things was done.
He did a good job of representing that approach in a solo way. Yeah. Right.
But I remembered seeing the band this part and feeling like I wanted more. Like I remember like in the Rubber Boys part, I felt like they almost showed more skating of you because you had different terrain. Like the band this part was mainly flat ground and that 1-3 stair. There was a couple of you all had a couple stairs in a row, and then you had that front board on that rail. I thought that was cool, but I remember like being like, "Oh, it's over."
Yeah.
But I like how he also you mentioned this in previous interviews, how he basically made them look like they were one day of skating, and you wore the same clothes, and it just looked like, hey, we're gonna go out and just skate. Anyway, I remember too seeing the ragdoll board for the first time. Being a fan, and I lived in a small town in Alabama, and we couldn't get all the boards, so I saw it in the magazine. But I remember, do you remember Sean Young?
Yeah, dude, Sean's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Ripper on guitar.
Totally.
We would jam together out in San Francisco.
Everything Sean did, he did well.
Yeah.
He is that dude. When I was young, Sean lived in the town over from me in Alabama.
Okay.
Yeah. And then his parents ended up moving to New England, and his skateboarding was light years around everybody around us. Like he was always way in front.
Yeah.
At any rate, he came to visit from New England right when he moved there, and he had the ragdoll board, and it was the first time, it was the full-size one. He had it, and it was the first, I remember it being kind of big, too, like, wow, that's kind of a big board. And he was the first dude I ever, in real life, saw do a 360 flip and an impossible.
Wow.
And they were both on that board, and he was so talented, but it was like this thing came together. Like my local inspiration that I knew he was the best one around. He was way beyond. He was way better than all of us. Like way better.
Yeah.
And he was skating your board, which I'd always wanted to see one in person.
Oh, okay.
And then now I got to see one in person, and not only did I get to see it in person, I got to see it in action.
Like that dude,
the
killing.
dude, yeah. And he was like working. He was doing like backside 360 ollies around that time.
Right.
And in our town in Alabama, like we were so starved for content.
Yeah.
I had Sick Boys. I know you had a couple tricks in that too, but I had Sick Boys, and then we had the Bones Brigade video shows. We had Animal Chin. And then Public Domain, and this maybe it was around the time Bandness came out, but we didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
So we had bits and pieces, and because the look of it was so professional, and it was such like almost like a blockbuster skate video.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I felt like that wasn't for me to have. I felt like it, until Sean, I saw him do it in real life, right in front of me.
Totally.
He like bridged the gap between what the PAL video was and what my life was.
Yeah.
And then, like Chet gave me that hope. Sean was like the local to be like, look, not even look. It was just like, I'm watching it go down. This guy could be in one of those videos.
Yeah.
I just remembered it lit a whole nother level of inspiration.
And the crazy thing is like, no matter how much inspiration you can get from videos, like it pales in comparison to when you can see it live.
Yeah.
It's like music, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can listen to an album and you're like, this is good. But when you're seeing that band doing their thing live and you're feeling the air from the speakers, the energy from the band and the crowd, it's just a whole nother thing. Mm-hmm. And skateboarding is the same way. Like when someone's like right there in front of you, like killing it, it's got such a different deal than just watching it on because now it's tangible. It's like when it's on the screen, it's like it's inspiring, but it does have this sense of like on the outside of the action. You're viewing from the outside.
It's far away.
But when you see it live, you're in the action. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a different thing. So I could relate to like, what you felt from Sean. Yeah. And what that could inspire.
Yeah, and it sounded like you had a lot of that going on. You grew up in California, so it wasn't rare for you to get some burst of
what was a little more accessible was, I still had to travel to it. Like, it wasn't in my town. Because me and Robert, we were kind of the dudes that were kind of like, we're going here, you guys. Like, that whole crew that I talked about that taught me so much and opened up the possibilities of the culture of skateboarding and experiencing so many aspects of it. Like, those dudes were all predominantly vert and ramps, And so when I kind of had this epiphany after breaking my wrist, it was kind of me and Robert were kind of like off on our own. So even in San Jose, we were just kind of solo in a sense for the stuff that we were getting excited about. And I think that's why it was so important to get out to Sacramento, because they were functioning and excited about the same things that we were excited about. Yeah. We were all having the same conversation. We kind of weren't having the same conversation per se anymore with all my buddies that I started skating with. Yeah. Because they were like, we're skating ramps. And I'm like, dude, I want to practice because we want to go skate this contest that's coming up in a week. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so I can relate to that sense of like, you don't really have much of it and you go to where you can get it.
Yeah. And we did the same thing. Like, when I got really into skating, like 8th, 9th grade, and I was old enough to kind of travel a little bit, we started going all around the Southeast. We started going to Pensacola, Florida, Panama City Beach. We started going to Atlanta, Columbus.
You go where it's happening.
Yeah, wherever we could. And we would, you'd link up with a crew, you'd meet a crew somehow, and then that crew, you knew that they would be out skating and they'd be pushing it on the weekends. And, going there compared to staying in your town was flat, what I mean? Like, my town was flat. There wasn't a lot going on, but we would go, like you said, wherever it was happening. Mm-hmm. And so to fast forward a little bit, like, you rode for PAL. Like, what was it? I mean, that's huge, obviously. And at this point, you're pro for, one of the biggest companies. But then there was another changing of the guard. Like, what how did it go about you leaving Powell and you went to the firm, right?
Yeah.
So how did that go down, and how where were you in that process?
So, I mean, it's so crazy when you think about that whole period, because I feel like back then, 6 months is kind of like the equivalent of like 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now.
I would agree with that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's crazy when I think that, I turned pro in 89. I want to say firm was like 91.
Yeah, not very far after
so
that.
It's crazy because like in this 2-year little window, I feel like a lot transpired.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
basically the foundation of your career was in that 2 years.
Yeah, I mean it started at 88.
Well,
yeah, exactly. But you're right.
Your pro career.
Yeah. Like I'm able to be around to this day because of those 3 years.
Yeah.
88 to 90.
Yeah, well, that's the foundation, and you build on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But again, like it's heavy to think again that so much happened in such a small amount of time.
Yeah.
But that's just the way it was.
Totally.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I got on Alva in like maybe beginning of 86 or something. Then, or maybe middle of 86. Then got on GNS.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, wrote for GNS. And then got on Powell.
Yeah.
And so, basically what Powell was, once street skating came in and really came in and took over, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say took over, when the brand started following suit with having more street pros and
totally
putting more investment into street skating, then I think Stacy got disinterested in all of it. I think there were a lot of things that happened that led to him just wanting to move on. Rocco, the way that you did videos, how technical the tricks were becoming. Stacy never wanted to sit there for a long time filming one trick.
Mm-hmm.
If we went out filming with Stacy, if you weren't getting your thing happening in the amount of time that he was willing to sit there, you're moving on. So the whole like we're gonna take hours to get this one thing, Stacy was just like,
yeah,
no.
and it showed, because some tricks wouldn't even be there'd be 75% of the trick and it would just go in the part. Like if you were, you'd think that they stepped off or something because Stacy would cut them so tight,
Mm-hmm.
And you knew that the guy was capable of making it because he showed you that the guy was capable, but he didn't even really care if the whole rollaway was there. It was kind of like, let's just show what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, it's so, you have to think about back, like, Stacy's almost creating how skateboarding is being presented.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And so the choices that he made during that time, I mean, here's the crazy thing. He's shooting film.
Yeah, 35 millimeter film.
He's shooting film.
Yeah.
So that's playing a huge part of how long are you willing,
Mm-hmm.
how many cartridges or whatever it is, reels at that point are you willing to run through to see this one trick?
Yeah.
When he's seeing the whole overall picture, maybe thinking like, it's not really even going to do that much.
Yeah.
Possibly. Who knows?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But again, all of that coming into play, I think Stacy was just like, I'm done. And so basically, once Stacy left, there was no vision.
Yeah.
It was just kind of, we all were sitting there just being like, okay, like, our captain's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where's this ship going?
Right. And
You
then
know
it was
what I
like
mean?
one by one, like Tony
Yeah.
Stark's Birdhouse.
Boom, boom. And then Lance's thing was interesting because Stacy was telling George for a long time, like, especially after Rocco came in and what 8th Street was doing, Stacy was like, you gotta let these guys do what we did. You gotta let them do their own thing, So by the time Jim and Tommy bailed, I want to say even McGill and Tony were gone, then George comes over to Lance and is just like, let's start a brand under you. It'll be a part of Powell, but you'll be, the creative behind it, and it'll kind of be like it's your thing. And so that's kind of how the firm started. It started under that premise. And then the more Lance went down that road, he was like, you know what? I'm always going to have to answer to George. I'm just going to do this on my own. And he was just like, I'm going to do this on my own. Do you still want to do it? And I was like, yeah, totally. And that's how.
Because at that time, you and Lance had already, you'd had a bond together. Or?
Me and Lance was my dude from the time I got on the team. Straight up.
What do you think the connection there was? Or...
Lance has a really...
Besides the obvious that Lance is the best.
Yeah, but the qualities that makes him the best, or that I really appreciated, was that he was really informative. He's a thinker. Mm-hmm. He'll dissect stuff like you wouldn't believe, mm-hmm. And
almost to his detriment.
Yeah, I know it can be a struggle.
Yeah, he overthinks a lot of things. Yeah.
But being a naive 16-year-old kid in this environment now, you're looking to someone that you can trust. Mm-hmm. And that was Lance.
Yeah, he has those qualities for sure.
Oh, because he'll be honest with you, and a lot of his perception on things is pretty close. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so, quickly I was just like, he was my go-to. Anything I was tripping on or questioning, I'd ask him, and he can explain it in a way to where I'm like, oh, okay, whoa.
Almost like a mentorship.
Straight up mentorship. Straight up big brother.
Yeah.
Not only just for business kind of things, like being a naive kid, all of a sudden a part of this machine, if you will, mm-hmm. but just in the history of skateboarding. I've always had older skaters in my life to be like, hey, this dude. Getting on Powell, going on these tours, and hanging out with Lance, it was just it was college for skateboarding. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I was just like a sponge, just like, yes. Oh, I get why that dude's important. Oh, cool. Mm-hmm.
Because he's a scholar of mm-hmm. skateboarding. He has a wealth of knowledge. Mm-hmm. I mean, probably one of the most knowledgeable people still in skateboarding.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah. And having his ramp, the dudes I would meet through just skating the ramp. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Guys would come by like Freddie DeSoto and Steve Hirsch and these dudes that rode for Veriflex, and me being like, hey, those guys are kind of cool, and then him being like, pull me in and show me the magazines, and he's like, boom, and I'm like, wow, that's so cool. I've always loved the history of things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It plays such a huge part of me experiencing and appreciating, and it's a part of the process that I really find enjoyable, and so when I can get with people who have that knowledge, it's that's such a cool thing, and so, but anyways, yeah, and so when Lance was like, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm like, yeah, no brainer, let's do this, I trust you, let's get it, because what are we doing? We're not doing anything.
And then the Grubers came in. You guys put together a team.
Well, first it was going to be Colin McKay, myself, and even Moses possibly at that time. But then Colin bailed out. And then Lance had been talking with Keith Gruber. And then Keith came on. Joe didn't come on till later because Joe was riding for Vision. Mm-hmm. And so it was me, Lance, and Keith at first. Mm-hmm.
That's a big leap. I mean, around that time, but I know that you guys already saw that things weren't happening.
It didn't feel like a big leap. It felt like an escape.
Yeah.
It felt like freedom. Because you have to remember, it had gotten, Rocco did his job. Rocco made the big brand lame.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Rocco was able to come in with that that energy of that DIY approach, and he brought that to skateboarding as a brand. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't cool to be a part of a big brand. And if a big brand's suffering and you're just like, whoa, you know? And so at that point, it didn't feel like a leap at all. It just felt like, okay, cool. It felt like a solution.
Yeah,
that's
cool.
Felt like a resolve, you know?
I can totally relate to it. I mean, I can see how it felt that way. And I've heard the stories for people like leaving PAL at the time. And, you know, PAL and Santa Cruz suffered a similar fate during that time period. And thankfully, they both, you know, made it through. But
yeah, totally.
So you and Lance, you guys are doing the firm. Do you think that your closeness and your relationship with Lance, because Lance was a Christian at the time, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that helped lead you to the Lord, or like, you know, finding the Lord?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people that God put in my life to show me His love for me, you know. And I would say for sure, Lance. I say my grandmother, you know. She was huge in showing me and being an example of what Jesus can do in someone's life and in their heart, you know. But yeah, totally, you know. I remember there's a time we were in France, and there was these like Christian missionaries that were out there, and Lance was leaving to go to a contest. It was me, Lance, Soren Abbey, and Bucky Lassett. And we had just gotten to the hotel. We came from a demo or something, got to our hotel. Me and Bucky went and put our stuff in the room. And then we went down to say bye to Lance, because Lance was bailing to go to a vert contest or something. And so Lance talking to these people, and I'm like, who's this? Who's Lance talking to, right? It was like this older lady and her husband, you know. And I walk over there, and this lady walks over to me, and she's like, hi, how are you doing? And I'm like, hey, how's it going? And she's like, do you believe in God? And I'm like, okay, here we go, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, my grandmother used to read the Bible to me a lot, you know. I mentioned something like that, and she's like, you loved your grandmother, huh? And I'm all, yeah. And she's like, yeah, your grandmother's good, doing good. She's with Jesus now. And I remember I was like, oh. Because I'm like, I didn't tell her that my grandmother passed away. My grandmother passed away like probably like 2 or 3 years prior. You know what I mean? And then I remember I was just kind of like, whoa, this lady's tripping me out. And especially because she called that out, and she was so confident in it, you know? I was just like, whoa, dude. And then she called over to her husband and was like, honey, you see this one? He's going to be a strong one in 3 years. And I remember I was all, strong one. I knew she meant like a Christian, right? And I remember I was just like, oh, it was like a death sentence. I was like, what the heck? Like, what? And I was like, I didn't know what to do with it, because she called it out on my grandmother kind of thing, you know? And I remember just being like, whoa. And so I remember we go back, and she went over and talked to Bucky also, you know. And I remember like just feeling weird, right? We get to the room, Lance is gone, they all leave, and I'm like to Bucky, I'm like, dude, that lady was kind of trippy. And he's like, yeah, she was trippy. And I was like, dude, what'd she say to you? And he was just like, you know, yeah, she called it out on, you know, I can't remember specifically what he was talking about, but he was just like, yeah, she made me feel weird too. Like, she was kind of spot on with something, you know. And so anyways, I come back home, and then I'm just kind of, I know Lance is a Christian, you know, and so I'm like asking him, like, dude, that lady was trippy, she did this. And Lance was just like, some people have that gift, you know. And I remember I was just like, whoa, dude, whoa, you know. But you know, what led me to Jesus was I was just uncomfortable with my life and not having answers to things, and it just built up from so many years, you know, and nobody really having answers for me, really, you know. But again, you know, my grandmother praying for me and reading the Bible to me, I had this knowledge of God, but didn't know Him, you know. But I wasn't like a lot of my friends that were just kind of super anti. Like I was more open, you know. And yeah, he drew me one year to Him in I was in Amsterdam, red light district actually, and I had been there years before and didn't think anything of it, but I was searching for truth, you know, and He honored that.
It's weird that you found truth in the red light district.
Yeah, because the contrast was so heavy.
Yeah.
I got to a point through that night of just being like, it wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't know what it's supposed to be like. Mm-hmm. But I remember I could vividly see just the emptiness and the lust of what was happening there. You know, I would look at the women in the, you know, in their little rooms in the windows, and I could just see like they were just dead inside, you know. And then I'd see all the dudes, like, you know, like the quote unquote like prettiest ones, like she would be the ones that could pick what dude, right? The other ones were like trying to get you to come in, but the one that was like the most attractive had all the dudes lined up trying to like be the one to get picked to go in with her, you know what I mean? And it was just like that scenario, just because I was seeking truth, because I was just so tired of my life and was just kind of, you know, I mean, God says that he come near to Him and He'll come near to you, you know what I mean? And I was trying to come near to truth, and He's the way, the truth, and the life. So just that desire of wanting to come near sincerely to truth, He was drawing me to Him, you know. And part of that was I felt like I was super aware of that scenario was just super potent to me in such a different way because I was seeking truth. And so I was just like, whoa, this is heavy. This is really heavy, you know. And by the end of that night, I was just like, man, my grandmother is right. He's the way, the truth, and the life. And I was just like, I'm just going to follow God. And I remember I was like, dude, I'm not going to tell anybody, because I don't need people to be like, here, come to my church, or here, come here. Or I was just like, dude, it's just going to be me and you, Lord. I'm going to read the Bible. My grandmother had passed away, and so it was like, I didn't really have her to like share with the news. But God in His faithfulness, I get home and there's a knock at the door like the next morning, and it's like these Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're knocking at the door, and then they're telling me their spiel about like, you know, did you know we're supposed to live here forever? And I remember I was just kind of like, dude, my grandmother talked about a heaven. And I remember just thinking like, dude, this is sounding kind of weird to me. But what I love is how God used that opportunity to teach me more about Him. And Lance was huge in that, because I would just be like, Lance, what's going on? Like, they're saying this and that. And Lance would be like, dude, read this verse, read John, whatever, you know, just show me a verse.
Sending you back to the Bible.
Just sending me back to the Bible. And that process was huge because it gave me a foundation.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. And so I'm very thankful for a lot of things, but I'm thankful for that. In Lance, I had somebody to talk with about these things. Yeah. You know, because none of my friends, they would just kind of be like, they poo-poo that in a heartbeat. Yeah. Like anytime.
I was gonna ask, how did that affect your interpersonal, or like your friendships and your relationships? What did when people found out?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a verse in the Bible that says to not have zeal without knowledge. You know. And I function in a lot of zeal without knowledge, you know, because He says too, like, I'll bring you out of the darkness and into my wonderful light. And it's just like, dude, that night in Amsterdam, the biggest load was lifted off of me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I didn't have all the answers, but I knew where to go.
Yeah.
You know?
I can relate to that.
Yeah, and so it's this kind of like, but there's this, when you have all this weight lifted off of you, there's this excitement of just like, wow. It's like it's like, I always use the analogy, it's like you with your friends and everybody sitting around complaining about there not being any good skate spots or whatever, you know, and you're out on your own searching because you're just fed up, right? And you're just like, I'm over this, I'm gonna go look. And you look and you actually find an amazing skate spot, and it's got all of the ingredients that are wanted, right? You go back to your friends, you're not gonna be all chill about it. You're not just gonna be like, oh, like as they're complaining, you're not gonna be like, yeah, I know, and keep it to yourself. You're like, you want to be like, dude, I got the spot. Come on, dude. Like, let's stop wallowing in our mud right here. Let's go have fun. I've got the spot. I'm skating it every day. It's so fun. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, right, dude. There's nothing good over there. Like, yep. I was that dude from the jump. Just like, you guys, it's so clear. Like, But a lot of it was zeal without knowledge, you know?
Yeah,
and so I'm thankful that I don't mind if people are offended if it's because of the truth, if it's because of God's word and what he says. Where I struggle with is when I get in there and mess it up. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I acknowledge that zeal without knowledge was me getting in there, being excited and messing it up, because a lot of it didn't have to go down that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, that being said, my friends were super understanding.
Yeah.
I feel like in the mix of all that, you know.
That's cool, and I think that, I mean, obviously that probably helped your relationship with Lance throughout the, time on the firm, and you guys had that bond together and had that level of conversation and
for
support.
Sure. Yeah, because when you talk about mutual interest, I mean, to me, this is the interest that's more important than any interest that could ever be out there.
Yeah.
You know? And so, yeah, to be on that, to have that in common, it's everything, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I could see that. I mean, I had that with my wife, but I didn't have that with like a close skate friend, and I think that it kind of stunted my growth a little bit in my walk because, I was around, like everybody I was around was into totally different stuff.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like flying solo for a while.
Yeah.
But so to kind of shift gears a little bit, like I know that you've been shooting photos for a lot of years now, and your photography is something you're very passionate about. Like when I think of you, I think of, your skateboarding, all the skateboarding on Powell, those lines and stuff, and then I think of all of the firm video and all the footage that you put out with the firm. But then I think of music and photography like really close in there. When did you start fostering a passion for photography, and what role does that play in your life now?
Again, like, when you talk about interest, it's like God's given me that curiosity about wanting to explore things and to, I guess, entertain them. And so for me, what happened with photography is, growing up in skateboarding around so many talented photographers, feel so blessed and spoiled to be around so many talented people just in skateboarding in general. But when especially in the era and the time that we got into skateboarding, when the magazines functioned off of, these are photos that dudes printed in a dark room that end up in the magazines, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, growing up with photographers that grew up with film, and much like vinyl, much like tape for recording music, there's just a quality to that I'm just really enamored with, And so having been steeped in and around all of these talented photographers that functioned with the medium and the materials of the medium that excite me, like basically I'm talking about prints and film, you know, Tobin, Gabe, Spike, Humphreys, you know, Kevin Thatcher, Mofo, Bryce, like Grant, like going to their photo shows, or some of them handed me prints. Like I would love when like Mofer would hand me a print, or even Luke Ogden or something like, oh, I printed this the other day. There's such an emotional dynamic or feel to that that I've always admired that.
Yeah, you feel like there was a process to create what I'm holding.
Yeah.
And it wasn't convenient. And someone went through that process.
Yeah.
They're actually giving you something tangible that has value because of that
And
time invested.
And not only, and that's a hindsight thing. A lot of it is the feel that it exudes.
Yeah.
You're just like, this just looks so cool.
Yeah.
Just based on that alone. And then you find out the backstory that makes it cooler.
Yeah.
But the actual thing itself, I'm just like, dude, this has a feel to it, and this is whoa. And so I've just always had a respect for those guys, and especially being on the other end of their cameras, I've always been intrigued with like, what camera is that? Whoa, 4x5, whoa, 8x10? Oh, what, a Hasselblad? Or what's, you know, and I always, and I started to notice like certain, like people's personalities with their cameras, you know, like the ones that they would like, and it was just, because I knew to them, yeah, they came to it through skateboarding, but I think because of playing music and even skateboarding, you can appreciate someone's affection towards their tools.
Yeah.
You just get it. You know that, like, dude, like, they dig that. You know what I mean? And so there was something that I just always had a lot of respect for that, you know? And then, you know, one year being on a long tour, we were out for like 2 months, and like 2 weeks into that tour, just realizing like I'm blowing it. I'm not capturing moments. You know, it was way before phones having cameras and stuff like that. And I remember on that trip just being like, dude, I need to get a camera. And my friend Joe Brook being like, dude, when we get to New York, I'll take you to B&H and I'll get you the camera. I'll tell you the camera that you should get. And then go there, and he turns me on to this little point and shoot Yashica T4, which was like the hip camera at the time. All the skate photographers were getting them because of the lens. Had this Carl Zeiss lens, which that was rare for that type of camera and at that price. And so I got that, and dude, I just ran that for years. And I love the process of it, of just going on this trip, shooting, coming home, taking the rolls over to like the drugstore, then getting my prints back and showing it to like my friends, taking one, putting it up on the wall and being like, dude, that was cool, you know? But then what happened was digital came in, and then they came the digital version of that, and it just didn't have the same feel. It was slow. I would miss moments because it wouldn't trigger right when I would hit, you know? And
because it had all these auto functions.
This auto function, and it just wasn't fast.
Yeah.
Just didn't, because it had an autofocus too, so it had to do that first, and then but all the while I had that camera, I would look over at my wife's Pentax K1000, which to me, that camera represented the zone that my friends functioned in, basically. Like, you have to know what you're doing to use that thing, you know? And I would look at that thing from time to time and be like, man, one day I'm going to learn that. It's no different than, like, I would look over at my, you know, I had a synth or see someone using a synthesizer in a, you know, in a video, or hear it on an album and be like, man, synths are cool. One day I want to figure it out. I want to learn that. It always starts with that little seed. And then what happens is it'll just kind of grow and grow, and sometimes it'll take years and sometimes it doesn't. But once it grows, I've got to do it. And that's what happened with photography. It was like the seed was in there, and it would get watered from time to time because of the T4 or because of seeing my wife's camera. But it would get to the point where it's like, okay, it's got to poke out of the soil now. And that's what happened with me with photography about 10 years ago. I was just like, okay, I've got to do it. I just got to do it. And so once I figured out a way to get in the darkroom, because a huge part of my enthusiasm or interest towards it is to go print it also. Like, I saw that as the two functioning together, almost like the guitar and the amp.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, I can shoot it, but I need to have it be expressed. And so I need to get in the dark room. And so that was a hang up for a little bit. I was figuring out, like, knowing, like, dude, I can't get Ed and Deanna to hold my hand through this process at their dark room. Like, they're so busy. So, and I don't know anybody else who's got time or has a dark room. And so I was just kind of like, I don't know how I'm going to figure that out. But I met some skaters that were taking a beginning black and white course at the community college here in Long Beach. And they were like, yeah, you just go in and take that and you got access to the dark room. And I was like, let's do it. And then
that is cool. That's gone now though, probably, right?
So I maxed it out.
Oh, right.
You can only sign up for a certain amount of labs, and so I maxed it out.
They still have it?
Oh yeah.
Really?
You can to this day. Yeah, most.
I'm moving to Long Beach.
Yeah. No, I mean, dude, most colleges will have it happening.
I'm just kidding.
You know?
I think we have it on our way, but I just haven't heard about it in a long time.
No, you're right though. I mean,
that seems like an old
they're trying to phase that stuff out.
Yeah,
but here's the cool thing. Black and white is still the best way to teach beginning photography. And because of that happening with computers and getting it all set up to where every student could have their own computer with a digital camera and all that, it makes it to where they don't really have the budget, so it's still more cost effective to have this dark room that you've already invested in.
I never would have thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So but now you have a Leica and you've actually done some things for Leica, right?
Yeah, they did a piece that, I don't know what they want to call it, like a video portrait or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was called Let Us Roam. Yeah. And they did one with myself, Arto Sari, Atiba Jefferson, and Greg Hunt. And yeah, that was cool. I mean, much like a skateboard, you kind of figure out, what excites you, right? Like we all have skateboarders that were like, dude, that dude is helping me see the direction of what I want to do. Like for me, it was Gons, Randy Smith, getting into photography, it was like when I started to look at the dudes that excited me, they're all shooting these. And going back to Humphreys and Tobin and Spike, the one thing I remember with those guys is that they would have their bigger Nikons and whatever to shoot skating, but when they were shooting like the lifestyle stuff or the behind the scenes or whatever you want to call it, they would have this. And I could tell, like, they dug this guy more than the big dude.
Yeah.
The big dude was like, yeah, we need this to get this job happening. Yeah. But this was kind of like the Sunday driver.
Yeah.
This is my, Porsche or whatever, And so it's funny that the more that I got in and started to figure out what excited me in photography, a lot of it came from what I experienced and what I saw from, my friends in skateboarding that are great photographers. But then the more I dug into guys outside of skateboarding and they use that same camera, I was like, oh, that's the tool.
Yeah.
That's the tool for what I want to do, And so what I'm so thankful for about, again, skateboarding is because of how dynamic it is and how it functions within our culture, that interest in it, or what I mean to say is, the interest that you have in it, like my interest in photography, and because of where skateboarding is, then the brands start to pay attention and want to be a part of what you're doing because they see it as being an asset to what they want to be doing.
Yeah, you're creating things. You're creating tangible assets that your sponsors can use.
Yeah. But I'm saying, to get these brands like Leica that doesn't come from skateboarding, but to have that come back to you because of your enthusiasm for their product, but because of the culture that you're a part of, now they want to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, right.
And what's so cool about that is I've been able to do that with brands that I genuinely love.
Yeah.
No,
I can totally understand and appreciate that. So
that's how that video came about.
Yeah.
The Let Us Roam and all that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So going from, turning pro for Powell, riding for the firm, you had some injuries throughout there, right? You have an ankle injury that was kind of plaguing you for a while?
Yeah, I mean, right when I got married in 2000, inward heel flip on the flat ground and just landed primo and just went to stomp it, and it just pushed my toe up into my shin. And just what it did in there, man, it took a while to kind of get that back in shape and
that was
and
like
strong
the
again.
First major injury that kind of took you out for a bit?
Well, no. I mean, I'd rocked my back before, riding for Powell, landed, thought I was going to hang up on a backside grab the fakie, pulled out my back foot, but jammed up my front foot because of the hold and because of the grab, and then landed on the flat bottom straight legged on one leg, and it just went wham to my pelvis. And dude, that was a tough one. That took a while. I would say that and my ankle were kind of like scaphoid.
Yeah, scaphoids are a nightmare.
Dude, 7-8 months.
Yeah.
Full arm cast.
And sometimes you can go, like, they don't really heal. Remember Salman had a cast.
Well, so this is what I learned. My dude was like, he was hip to it.
Yeah, above the elbow cast in the beginning.
Yeah, because he says it takes so long that these half arms, you doing that, it's never going to catch.
Yeah.
It never catches the heel. And so it was longer on the front end, but I'm good on the back end.
Yeah. I had the same exact advice from my doctor. I broke my scaphoid and they put me in an elbow cast, and I was so bummed on it. But it healed.
Yeah,
I didn't have the plaguing, have to have surgery and all that.
Yeah.
So throughout all of that, your skateboarding, you've had all these evolutions where you've come back and, created video parts and done these things. What role does skateboarding play kind of in your life now? Like, do you get to skate as much as you want, or is it kind of like a medley of photography, skating, and music, and it's kind of like...
Yeah, I mean, the older you get and the more responsibilities you have, you never get to skate as much as you want. That's just the reality of it, And so, for me, it's tough because a lot of these other opportunities will arise that are good opportunities to function in or to endeavor towards, But at the heart of it, I'm just a skateboarder. And as long as my body can hang in there, like, I want to be doing it, The challenge becomes in the getting over the humps, getting the momentum is what I mean to say, because that's the way anything functions. Like, you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Yeah.
And so what I have a hard time with is you can get a little momentum, but then that will stop. And then for me, maybe a trip playing music or a trip functioning in some other way, not skateboarding or something. You're coming back trying to start that momentum again, And so, but when that momentum can get going to a certain place, that's where it can be super enjoyable again, and because you feel strong and you feel confident, And so that's kind of my battle, is like getting that momentum.
Yeah, you need enough time on your board to get the momentum.
That's what I'm trying to say is like getting those windows where that's all you're doing.
Yeah.
Functioning in that, and it's tough.
I mean, that is basically why pro skateboarders, a lot of them retire. It's that and injury.
Yeah.
Responsibility seeps in, or you get injured, and those are the two reasons. And sometimes too, people, they lose that fire because self-preservation kind of takes over, and you don't really want to risk it in order to get hurt, in order to kind of set you back with the other things you enjoy. But,
man, and I think that the hardest thing to do, but what is really important, is to identify however you feel about it. Understand that that's really influenced by where you are at the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
because it can be easy to not have that momentum and just feel like, I'm not into skateboarding anymore. But I don't really think that's the case, say that after you get momentum, then tell me you're over it, or whatever, or then
it's easy to say you're not into it when you haven't done it in a long while because you've had to do something else.
Yeah. And then when you go do it because the momentum's not happening, you're functioning in a way that you're just like, what the heck?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a steep learning curve in and of itself.
It is. It totally is. And you know what? Being in a long career, I mean, not quite as long as yours, but being in skateboarding and being pro for 25 years, you know, I've battled that almost 1,000 times, it feels like, you know, and it just takes a couple of days in a row or every other day at the skate park to kind of keep that like feeling of, you know, connectedness to your skateboard and to your body, you know, like staying in shape where you feel good doing what you're doing, you know, and the tricks feel good. And I mean, there's nothing like, for me, like when you start to get back into it, being able to like push yourself to the point where you're actually slamming and getting back up and you're like, yes, I miss this. I really love that. And
there's like a certain, you know, when you're pro, like there's a certain level that you function in, right? And then when you're for a long time functioning way below that level, and when I say level, I'm not just talking about, you know, ability, but I'm just talking about everything that comes with being in that zone.
Yeah.
Like the fight and the exhilaration and the fear and then the accomplishment or the rejection, you know what I mean? Like functioning in all those emotions, that's what I mean. When you're used to functioning in that space, being able to have those feelings and things, when that's taken out of the mix, and you don't, and because of not being able to be on the board much, not being able to peek up into that zone again, I think that's where you're probably the most vulnerable and can struggle with, like, dude, can I do this?
Yeah.
Should I be doing this?
I totally
do I want to be doing it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And but
it's like doubt sets in.
Pretty much, you know. But I think what I'm hearing what you're saying is like, but when you push over that learning curve and you start to peak and start to push through back in that tier or whatever, and you start to experience those emotions and things again, then you'll quickly find yourself being like, this is the raddest thing.
Totally. I give this analogy a lot, that skateboarding and the feeling of skateboarding is like a fire burning inside us. And that fire, it's possible, just like at the end of the night, the campfire gets dim. You know, if you don't skateboard much, the campfire gets dim, and you got to stoke the fire.
Yeah.
And the more often you skate, the more you're stoking the fire.
Yeah.
And if you skate every day and you get enough time under your belt on your board and it's feeling good again, you got a raging bonfire.
Yeah.
And you're just going full throttle, you know.
Yeah.
And I've had to carve out time like it's a meeting in order to get myself to the skate park, you know. And you see Thebo does that regularly. You see Thebo has the photos of his boards on his Instagram at the skate park, and you're like, and the funny thing is he's posting that. Maybe he's just posting it because he's reflecting on the fact that he's thankful he went to the skate park. But what I see it as is it's a call to action. It's a call to action to everybody that loves skateboarding that didn't skateboard today. And it's like, hey, I have a family. I run all these brands. I'm a philanthropist. I'm making boards for everybody in need, and I still went to the skate park today. And I love that. I love it. It's like a calling card. It's like, you know, what's your excuse? And I love that about Thebo. But at any rate, I mean, I think that is the encouragement we all need. We all need the encouragement to get on our boards and find the time, because, you know, as skateboarders, you know, it makes us, you know, when we're skateboarding and when we're feeling it, it's like, I feel like I'm the best version. Like I'm optimistic, I'm alive, like I'm thriving, like all of a sudden everything else I'm doing clicks and makes sense. Sometimes when I'm having a tough day at work and like we're all kind of in a funk, you know, or like I work with like 5 guys and we're kind of, you know, creative and we're just kind of feeling a little bit stagnant, we go out, skate flat ground or skate the flat bar for like a half an hour, we come back all juiced, like we're so stoked to finish the day. And I feel like I feel like we all need that as skateboarders. But this will be my last question. What inspires you now, and what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, what inspires me is lately it's been kind of a lot of what we've just been talking about, and just I'm inspired to just really not lose that sense of wonder, like, when I think about what leads me to doing what I do, it's always this kind of curiosity, you know what I mean? Just exploring curiosity, pretty much, and so...
Because that's opened, like, pretty much every door that we've talked about for you.
I just think it's such a huge part of what makes life fun.
Yeah, so enjoyable.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And but I really like what the aspects of it that are surprises and that I don't foresee in it. And so that's where that sense of wonder kind of comes in. You know what I mean? Like I love not being able to see the story played out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the spontaneity or free will of the future. Like where it can go.
Yeah, because I think to me it's more about, like, putting my faith in Jesus, knowing that, like, my times are in His hands. Like, He's the one who's opened the doors for me to do what I do. There's this sense of, like, there's a lot of liberty in that, you know what I mean? And so it becomes more about, being the best husband I can be, being the best dad I can be. I mean, I'm inspired by my family. I'm inspired by my sons, their interests, and, like, them going off and getting excited about what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and,
I totally know what
And
you
somehow being a part of the launch pad for them in what ways I can help, you know? And so there's a lot of excitement in what they're gonna do.
Yeah, basically taking your experience and using it to nurture their passions.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and experience and resources, any of it, right? And so, I mean, even my wife, I'm just excited of, like, what she's gonna be doing.
Yeah.
Like, what we'll grow into, all of it. You know what I mean?
That's cool.
Like, that's exciting to me. That inspires me. You know what I mean? To just keep pressing on toward the goal.
Yeah,
really.
No, I back it.
Just being, I think the important thing is just trying to stay excited. Like, my fear is to be, like, it's funny because my kids would be like, I'm bored. And I'm like, well, that's not my responsibility. That's up to you. Like, and it's that kind of thing. It's like, I think in general, I'm just trying to make sure that I don't get bored.
Yeah.
Because there's no excuse to get bored. There's just too much fun stuff to do.
Yeah.
And so...
just discovering new things is fun. Like, there's so much of that can be done. But these days, kids rely obviously on electronics and phones and stuff. And then once they kind of, like, run through everybody who's all the Snapchats and all the Instagrams, then they're kind of like, what do I do now, Or their battery dies. Like, Lord forbid our kid's battery dies, and our kids are like, don't even know. They're like, so...
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. I mean, it can be done, but very rarely does something super healthy and positive come from that time.
Yeah.
Spent on it. Yeah. I mean, you have to be very intentional and navigate and chew the meat and spit out the bones.
Yeah, that's very true.
If you're... You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it's like... That one's a tough one,
Yeah.
But one of my favorite verses in the Bible is avoid all extremes. It's just, at the end of the day, so much of it is just a balance.
Yeah.
Too much of anything's not good.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think where there's a healthy knowledge and there's a lot of intention towards trying to keep that balance, then that's like a good place to be functioning in, right?
Cool. Well, lastly, what's next? Do you have any shows coming up, or do you have any travel plans with music or skating?
So I just finished a new album, and then Indy's doing a signature truck, cool. So that'll come out in May, and then so this album will come out with the truck.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's a collaboration with Thomas Campbell. Thomas did all the art.
Awesome.
Not only for the album, but for the truck. In the collection that will come out with the trucks,
yeah.
and then the album will be released on his label called Arts, and so pretty excited. I'm excited for people to hear it.
Is it a solo album?
Yeah, it's a solo album, but I have my friends playing on it. So my one friend, Johnny Herndon from this band Tortoise, is playing drums, and then my friend Josh Lippy's playing some bass on it.
Cool.
But
instrumental.
Yeah, it's instrumental, and it's very little guitar.
Really?
It's all analog synths.
Oh, so that's...
And drums.
Is this your first big composition or like compilation of music with that releasing?
It's the only thing with synth. It's like first synth album.
Wow.
But I was just like,
that's cool.
I'm excited about this. It's no different than photography or first grabbing the guitar. It was just like, I told myself like, man, it'd be so fun to learn analog synthesis. Like I'm so intrigued with it. And so just kind of hopped in the deep end and was just like, all right, let's go for it. And
awesome.
I'm so thankful that Thomas was down to support the journey and be a part of it. He produced the album, and so
that's super cool. I love Thomas.
Yeah. And so that's gonna come out in May, and there's talks of touring it, but
and this is gonna come out in May too, so we're right
all
on track.
right, dude.
You're better at planning than you thought. All right, well, thank you so much, Ray. I really appreciate it, man.
Oh,
it was
man.
a pleasure sitting down and talking to you.
Hopefully.
Thanks for everything you've done too in skateboarding.
Oh man, hopefully you can edit this up and.
No, you went super deep on some things, and I think it's really cool to hear because, you normally just people skim the surface, on a lot of topics, and I feel like you really gave a lot of texture and background to what makes you who you are, and I'm stoked. I'm very appreciative.
Right on. Yeah.
Thank you.